Rising Stars is a chance to find and celebrate brilliant, talented architects from today. Sometimes they get lost in practice. You don't hear from them until a brilliant designer, say, has done sort of 10 years work and they get to do some public building. So this is a chance to actually find them, and there's some great stories.
Inclusive design is really for everyone. It's allowing everyone with different bodily shapes and sizes and diverse types of people to have bodily autonomy and independence in the built environment. One of the things I did a few years ago for my master's was a big research project. So I spoke to several hundred disabled people, and it really struck home for me that some of the comments they were saying about having to wash in the kitchen sink because they can't get upstairs to use the bathroom, or can't put their kids to bed because they no longer be able to use the stairs. And it felt that it was so difficult for so many people's lives, and there's 1.8 million disabled people who are in need of accessible housing at the moment, and I couldn't just stand by with that knowledge without doing something and using my voice to try and campaign for better.
It's about people and about democratising the construction process to make buildings accessible from the moment they're conceived of in the design stage all the way through to when they're built, and then through use as well. A lot of modern buildings, we think, especially public buildings, have a really long period after they're constructed where people have to get used to them. People have to, work them into their lives. And, community construction is fundamentally about shortening that time period so that the people that are most affected by the building are the ones that have a hand in its design. So the Scout Hut was an exciting project for us because the community, the Scouts, the people that lived in the area around the building, they were all involved from the start. It's all about generating connections between people. You meet your neighbours in a way that you may not have met them before. You generate people, connections between people and place. And those can be really, really powerful to embed people in their communities and in an identity that's kind of shared, understandings between people that are, I guess, foundational to how they relate to their environment.
I found myself reflecting on those times in my career that really gave me the most purpose. And that very much for me came from volunteering and giving my time to the architecture profession to make it more than it is. I'm a young trustee at the Architecture Foundation, and that for me is very much championing diversity in the profession, which is incredibly important now more than ever. So I very much promote different voices on their Instagram particularly, and I actually have recently created a few different kind of campaigns. So one of them is Quickfire Fridays, where I showcase different interviews with different up-and-coming initiatives or people doing interesting things in the architecture sector which people might not necessarily know about. One of the main issues in the architecture profession is that there's such a disconnect between architecture education and architecture in practice. So I thought of this idea where it would be nice to approach, not necessarily up-and-coming initiatives, but established maybe practices, established individuals, where they just describe what is a day in the life of their career, just to give people, students especially, an idea of what they can expect when they get into practice.
POMO is a bit of a sort of misnomer in that, what we're really trying to do is express our clients' personalities, their likes, their tastes, and really sort of embed their stories in the architecture and make the architecture speak about the clients and the users that use the spaces. Colour and form are just tools to express the concept and the ideas behind the project. So whichever kind of works the best to do that and to achieve the overall feeling or motion of the space and the concept as a whole. So I think that could be materials, it could be the texture of the wall, it could be the colour, or it could be the volumetric space. And I think space design itself is probably the most important, because that really makes or breaks a building. And then the layers of colour, form and material add to the spatial qualities. I really want to push our work into expressing communities and public institutions, and how that then gives you a larger pool of references and ideas to pull from, and then embed that into the architecture itself.
I think the important thing when you're considering conservation and sustainability is to consider the two together rather than considering them as two separate things. So think about what's important from a conservation point of view, what's important from a sustainability point of view, and then trying to achieve a balance between them rather than prioritising one over the other. The Egyptian Halls is a A-listed building in Glasgow that's been vacant for 40 years. In my role as chair of the Alexander Greek Thompson Society, it was Greek Thompson who designed the Egyptian Halls in the first place. We've been advocating for a reuse option to be found for that building. Over the recent years that's included a petition, big events, various awareness raising, and more recently that's involved a separate charity being set up which specifically looks at that. So at the moment we're looking to engage with the wider community in Glasgow as to what they want to see the building become, and also commissioning a business plan for what the future use of the building can be. One of the main things is that we're finding that we can deal with tenements that are in the ownership of social housing organisations in a particular way, but for private owners there's much bigger barriers. So one of the things that we've introduced is a kind of fixed fee service for private homeowners which assesses the condition of their tenements, makes recommendations for repair, and gives people all the kind of tools that they need to be able to take forward the maintenance and repair, and hopefully in the future retrofit of their tenements.
I've been part of a research project called AA XX100, which was at the AA school in London, and as part of that project I did 13 oral history life story recordings with women architects who were alumni from the school. So that includes Sue Rogers, Eldred Evans, Annette Austin Smith, and many others. And what was really important about doing those recordings was that those women's stories weren't written in architectural history. They were missing, or they were told through their partners or male counterparts. So there were a massive bit of architectural history that was being untold. And so in those recordings, we then captured those stories and those memories, and they're now kept in an archive and are part of our collective history.
Lighthouse Children's Home is a project which aims to effectively revolutionise the quality of care that children in this country receive in children's care homes. And the client is quite a visionary client and understands the importance of the built environment in providing that care for these children. And so it was my job to develop a brief with the client that helped to meet the children's needs from the very beginning, and not to make assumptions about what their needs were, but to really try to understand what it was that was going to help create the right kind of environment. In developing this first prototypical new kind of children's care home, we've learned an awful lot, and there's a lot that we'd like to take forward into other building typologies, for example elderly care homes, for which we know there's going to be increasing demand in the near future.
I've been working with a team within the Architecture's Climate Action Network to campaign for regulation on whole life carbon emissions through the building regulations, but also at planning stages. So for planning policy to require whole life carbon assessments to be done for all major developments. And I think another aspect of this is also thinking about demolition. There's an absolute travesty of the amount of demolition that happens in the UK, and we need to be prioritising the reuse of existing buildings. We need to be finding the opportunities in them. So a big way that we communicate these issues is through storytelling. So we need to look to inspiration from poets, from novelists, people that really engage with people on more than just a technical level. We need to start talking about this in its wider context as well, and as a profession we need to better understand the knock-on consequences of everything that we do. And I think that when we start to communicate on this, we need to take it to the really high level and also to the really small level. How does this affect the planet in terms of the way that we're warming the planet and the heating of the planet, but also how does it affect the individual, that one person that's going to use a space, their well-being, because that's incredibly important as well. And bringing those two things together, I think, is the way that we're going to solve the problem.
This year's cohort is really incredible for the immense variety of things that they're doing. So working on children's homes, teaching, educating children who are just still in school, working on co-design with people. There's just such a huge variety. We really see the talent.
We've been sponsoring the Rising Stars now for a number of years, and each year we see a new class of cohorts coming through, and it's fascinating to see how they've developed and how their passion and enthusiasm is still there. It really reassures us as a business that we're in safe hands as far as the architecture of the future is concerned.